Principal Matters Podcast, episode 512. Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. And I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke. And Jen, this week you're bringing another guest to our show, Will Darter. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Oh, you guys are going to love this guy. He's he's a principal of a rural school and does great work in the with the rural school network. And so we had a great conversation. So please join us for this conversation.
Yeah, well, before we listen to your conversation with Will, we have a question that came to you. Why don't you read that question, and then we'll give it a quick 5 minutes response, which is not nearly long enough.
So I got this in an email from a listener who said, how do you set the tone on day number one? And it immediately transported me to the August flood of social media posts on Facebook groups. Does anyone have a video I can show? Does anyone have a book I can read? Does anybody have an activity? Because everybody kind of panics, right? And I always want to say, hold on. You don't necessarily want a video clip that somebody 6 states away says is a good one. What you need to do is decide what tone you want to set. Yeah. And this is going to be different for everyone. But do you want humor? Do you want it to be welcoming, celebratory, somber? Like there are some times that schools have things happen over the summer in their community that you need to come in with a different tone. So you decide that first, and then you say, will this be best with a video opener or an icebreaker? Although you should probably not use that word. How can I set that tone based on what I want people to feel when they walk out of that first staff meeting or orientation?
Oh, that's such a great way to start. And I'll say a couple of things. First, let me just brag. Last year, my wife, she participates in a legislative action committee that supports our public schools. And so she was invited to the first day of school here in our community to set up a table and encourage people to vote. So she got to be in the opening meeting with all the teachers, and she came home and she was like, oh my gosh, Will, like from the very beginning to the end, they had like student performances, and they had the teacher of the year gave the talk this year. And she said, I ran into an old buddy teacher at the very end, and I was like, how do you feel about the year? And she was like, well, after this, I'm ready to go. She was like so excited. And I thought they set the tone. Yeah. They knew what they wanted to do with that day to just welcome everybody back and launch. And that's going to, like you said, it's going to look different from place to place, but there was intentionality there. And then I'm going to say something practical. In addition to that kind of intentionality around tone, your preparation for the big return also sets the tone. So when teachers show up and you've got, and I'm just going to say the things, you've got the faculty handbook updated and ready. You got the student handbook updated and ready. You've got the calendar set for the year. You've got all that master schedule stuff worked out, and people's resources are waiting for them. You just set the example for how their classrooms are going to feel or should feel for students when they come back too. So I think that's important, Jen, that all this hard work you do before that first day sets the tone for the first day. I don't know about you, but so many times I remember the first day of school feeling like this huge weight lift off of me because the ship is launched. Mm-hmm. But my job was to get the ship ready to launch with the team. And then once it's launched, then the teachers are doing their thing. And so to me, that's an important way of setting the tone on day one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, I say this all the time, I feel like a broken record, but I think it's critical not to do it alone. Mm-hmm. And I know some of our listeners have very small schools. Some of them have large schools with bigger teams, but ask someone, a guidance counselor, an assistant, a secretary, a few trusted teachers. Hey, how are people feeling? And what are they going to need from me on the first day of school? And that will help you decide what tone you want to set.
Yeah. And then last thing, I can't help it. If you're revisiting your mission or your goals, which a lot of people do, then the flip side of that, and this is how I coach, is now show me in your calendar where those commitments are being made with your time. So don't just, if you're going to make a aspiration, if you're going to say something that we're reaching this year or whatever, it better be reflected in the actual plan that you have on your calendar, or don't say those things. Exactly. And so I think that's an important way for teachers to feel like the tone you're setting and the goal that you're pointing us towards is actually reflected in the work that's been done to set up this year that we're getting ready to accomplish together. So I'm not saying any of that to overwhelm people, Jen, but I just think those are important dynamics to keep in mind. But what a great question. Thanks for bringing that.
Yes, and don't go to Facebook right away. First, think about your intentions,
That's
then
right.
go to Facebook for ideas.
Yeah. Do not play the comparison game.
No,
Do not do that.
no.
You be who your people need you to be.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that. Let's wrap up with that. But if you if you think, oh, this principal in Michigan had such a cute video and I don't have a cute video, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that, because your school is different and unique, and you can lead this. You've got it.
Yeah. They can watch videos all day on their phone.
Yes.
But they only get you.
That's just once.
Is you. So just be you.
Yep.
All right, Jen, thank you. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for listening in. And I know you're going to enjoy this conversation with Will Darter. Until next time, thanks for doing what matters. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Over 1 million teachers use iExcel in their classrooms every day for one reason. They love it. Why? iExcel is where the magic happens. With just one platform, teachers can personalize learning for every student. iExcel gives teachers all the tools they need to enhance and differentiate instruction without adding work to their plates. Plus, iExcel has decades of expertise and has proven to be effective. Studies on more than 70,000 schools across nearly 50 states show that those who use iExcel outperform others on state tests. Ready to bring the magic to your school? Visit iexcel.com/PM to learn more. Support for Principal Matters comes from DigiCoach and its walkthrough tool. When Kathleen Beckham was a district director, she would walk through classrooms and see teachers engaging students in learning or observe elements missing in instruction. Her biggest challenge was finding the time to give those teachers meaningful and helpful feedback they would value as coaching and not correction. In the past, Kathleen spent hours in follow-up email exchanges after informal walkthroughs. That all changed when she discovered DigiCoach. She now had a tool that could help her send immediate feedback from her phone or tablet. DigiCoach is a fully customizable tool created by school leaders for school leaders to not only collect walkthrough data, but also ensure every teacher receives ongoing support, feedback, and coaching. It features thousands of pre-written research-based commendations and coaching tips that can be included along with your own observation comments in a follow-up email, ensuring all teachers receive effective and timely support. Are you ready to make the most of your walkthroughs with a tool that saves you time and enhances meaningful feedback to your teachers? Go to digicoach.com to learn more and tell them that Principal Matters recommended you check them out. That's digicoach.com.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Principal Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, and today we are diving into a story. I can't wait for you all to hear this. This really sits at the intersection of where we grow up and where we end up and small town reality. I have an incredible guest for you today. In the world of education, we often hear or we assume that bigger is better, right? More resources, more staff, more programs. But my guest today is here to challenge that narrative. He is a rural superintendent, a national advocate for small schools, and the author of the book, The Empowered Rural Education Leader, which you can get on Amazon if you're interested. But what makes him unique isn't necessarily just his title, it's his journey. So this is a gentleman who did not start in the heartland of Missouri. His roots are in Orange County, California. But today he calls rural Missouri home, and he's discovered that some of the most impactful leadership in the country is happening in those small rural districts that these national maps and national conversations, honestly, often overlook. Dr. Will Darter, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Such a kind introduction. And I just want to echo, it's all about every leader in rural America right now doing the work in public education. So thank you for having me. I'm glad I get to just share a little bit of my story, and hopefully it connects and inspires you guys today.
Absolutely. And I want to know, we forget our country there are so many rural districts. Like even in my state, Will, we have, something like 450 of our 600 some districts are less than 2,000 kids. Where I work, we have a high school that big. So it's a whole different way of leading, right? And so let's start at the beginning, though, for our listeners. You are a rural educator now, but you didn't start out that way. So tell us where you started and what brought you to where you are now.
Absolutely. So my journey started in a different place than I am now. So I started in Orange County, California. My dad was a school custodian. And so I learned everything about school through working with my dad. I learned a lot of things about life, about service, about leadership. I always joke around, but I was the assistant custodian to my dad. And so even at growing up as a, 8, 9, 10, 11-year old, I was out there, working with my dad, making sure things looked great for my friends. And then I would see them at school, and so learned a lot about school, learned a lot about service and about making an impact in people's lives. And kind of grew up in that experience. You were talking just a little bit about beautiful weather, beautiful beaches, all of these wonderful things about, all the places that we grow up, but the West Coast for me. And then kind of got to a place where I was ready to kind of start that career myself and move to the Midwest. And all of my friends who are great friends in California are always like, why the Midwest? Like what drew you out there? And for me, it was school. And so I went to school in Kansas and met my wonderful wife there and started our family. And I started my educational teaching journey in urban education. And so it was very different than where I've landed now and very different than where I grew up in Orange County. And so I started in urban education. I was a baseball coach, curriculum director. And during that time, I just learned what it meant to connect people and what it meant to connect content, right, to students. And so how does, teaching poetry impact somebody in an urban setting? It impacts their life tremendously. And so I learned the power of that connection and the power of content, the power of belief in what people could do. Our baseball team, funny story, was 0-1 for decades. And we focused on building a strong culture. And at the end of our third year, we were 17-3. And so learned a lot in urban education, but mostly learned what it means to just love my neighbor, just to love people well and to serve them well. Some of those lessons I learned very early, serving with my dad as the custodian. Then fast forward a little bit, went to 2 suburban, very affluent districts, learned actually how to put systems in place, how to think, how to drive performance and student learning and engagement, even to a deeper level. But then as we started our family, just kind of had this call, right? And there was this district that was outside of our big city that always kind of had my heart. I remember driving through it and being like, this would be crazy one day if I was a superintendent in a district like this, right? And so then that opportunity happened and they posted their job. I went out and interviewed. And I've got to tell you, Jen, the minute that I walked in the door, I just had this sense that this is the right place for me. And so I've been here now. I've been serving, faithfully being a steward for 4 years in my current role in my community. And I got to tell you, small rural districts are where it's at. It is a special and wonderful place. Has its challenges, which I'm sure we'll talk about today, but definitely has its rewards as well.
Right. You and I were connected because of our mutual friend and person we watch, Eric Nichols, who also is a champion of rural educator in
That's
Oregon.
right.
So, I think the more voices we lift up, I think it's a very, very risky assumption to think that only, leaders in suburban or urban areas have really cracked the code on leadership, because as you said, it's different, right? And I do want to talk about that, the culture shock that you may have experienced. I grew up on a sheep farm, so I know rural. Even when I go home, I have to kind of code switch, right? And so talk to us about, driving out to that district, walking in, feeling like it's home, but also, wow, you probably don't have some of the resources or some of the, I don't want to say expectations, because expectations in rural are very high.
Right?
Yeah. Tell me excess. Yeah. You take the mic. Tell me about culture shock.
Well, I love the way you framed it. And it's funny because when I do talk to my friends in California, they're like, man, you are not Californian anymore at all. You are Midwestern to the core, and it's so funny because we're still friends. We still connect. I love the word that you use, the code switching, right? But when I walked into this building, it was so interesting to me because I had been a part of big systems my whole life and really my whole career. And when I walked onto the campus, I began to look around and say, I can impact that. I can impact that. I can build a team and we can do this together. And I have a dear friend of mine. He says small schools are like speedboats, and you can move them, and you can move, and you can go. And if you're a leader that has drive and ambition, you can make a real impact, right? And our big districts are like cruise ships, and I think you need both. I think you need both to play the role that they play. Comes to the culture shock side, it's so funny because I feel like I've kind of assimilated into that rural, point of view and that rural lifestyle where it's almost a culture shock to go back, to the larger systems that I was a part of, or even to where I grew up. And so just the ability to be okay with that is something that I've learned as a leader, that, and we'll talk about this a lot today, but the ability to embody your community and to care for your community the way it needs to be cared for, not what you want to get out of it. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's the heart of leadership and in rural communities. And I think you see that in spades with Eric. Absolutely.
Right. That's a perfect segue to this question. You've mentioned that there's a powerful story behind small schools that often goes untold. Why do you think the national narrative overlooks rural districts? And how are you and your colleagues like Eric and your book helping to change that?
What a great question. So I think nationally, rural schools are seen as out of the way, right? And it's just, many times we see maybe an older building and we drive by it and we're like, man, who lives in this area, right? And it's just kind of like, man. And then I think the national narrative is, man, we're spending money out in this area for, these schools. And should we be spending money in these areas for these schools? And I go through a whole conversation with people usually that I think rural schools are actually the best model for state funded because we really don't have a lot, but man, we sure do pack a punch and we do a lot. And so the national narrative is really kind of forgotten. Rural schools are forgotten. Rural schools are kind of out of the way, and they're often rebuked because they just don't have necessarily the flash, right? And one of the things that's so important to me, and one of the reasons that I put this book and my colleagues, we work together, is I think that more than being flashy, I think leadership is about being faithful. And I really think that the call to rural leadership is not a call to ascend the ladder of status. It's the call to climb the wall of significance. And so everybody can do that. You can do that in a big district. You can do that in a small district. But in a rural district, there's no hiding. There's no hiding your intentions. People will smell you out if you're there for the wrong reasons. And in order to last, in order to do the work that you're called to do, in order to serve people, you got to be there for the right reasons. And so I think rural schools really clarify the heart of education. And we need that voice in the bigger picture on the national level, that the heart of education is to make an impact in people's lives, to care for them. One of the exercises I do with one of my mentors is we write statements at the beginning of the year that we hope are said at the end of the year culturally. And one of the statements I have is, I want my staff in my district to say, Everton was the best district I ever worked in, right? And so that's significance, right? We want to pursue significance, not just the status of, hey, we built a new ball field. We want to pursue the significance of, this is a place where lives are changed.
Right. Well, and I want to talk for a moment about resources. There's, at least in my state, there's a lot of conversations now about how we're going to continue to fund schools. And it feels like the legislators are stripping all districts, rural, suburban, urban, of basic resources. And what's a little bit astonishing to me is that no one's really saying, the rurals are as lean as it gets. The
Right.
rurals are educating kids, which is, of course, a cornerstone of our country's belief that the young people should be educated. And they're doing it not only without flash, like you said, but without the, huge amounts of money that they probably want, but they're just doing it anyway. And so I think
Yeah.
I wish we were looking more at that.
That's so great in terms of, that conversation around equity and access. And I think advocacy is so important. My perspective on advocacy, especially as a rural leader, is I think that there's a couple of pieces here. I think number one, and I know I can speak specifically for my state and the experiences that I have. I think number one, when it comes to advocacy, I think we approach it a little bit in a wrong way. I think we approached it in a win-lose situation, especially as school leaders. And we can't really control necessarily what comes to us sometimes, but we can influence it, right? And so I think one of the things I always talk about with rural leaders is build better friendships, with your legislators, right? I think that, as far as a rule of human nature, we don't hurt our friends, right? We help our friends.
Mhm.
And so I think one of the things we can do in education on our side of things is we can be better friends. I love the opportunities I get to send a coffee to my representatives and say thank you, for representing our district, and I love to send those notes that say, hey, this legislation was great. That we really appreciate this legislation. And then the ones that hurt us, I love to reach out and say, how can I help with this? Because maybe you don't have all the information, right? The impact of what this is going to hit on the rural school. And that requires some self-control, because you're right. There's an emotional toll when I see the budget revenue go like this and I see the expense go like this. And that isn't a numbers thing. That's a walk out into my hallway and I see the second grader that needs that support for resources, right? It has to do with, and I'm not going to name that student, but that has to do with that student whose face I see in my eyes right now, and so that's an emotional thing, but it requires the self-control of the leader to say, I'm going to put aside emotion for just a second. I'm going to seek connection with people who I disagree with so that we can have a win-win situation in that situation in advocacy.
So you're also talking about empowerment. You see where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
You're talking about how we need to empower ourselves and empower those around us, which probably might be why you titled your book The Empowered Rural Education Leader. So talk to me about the decision to write this book and what you say in it and why people should pay attention.
Well, I always say this. This book came out of failure, big failure on my part. I tried to write this book 5 times, and I tried to write it 5 times over 4 years. It just was not happening. And so I think I threw every old manuscript I had for this book away just because it wasn't right and it wasn't what I wanted to say. And so I just had a really great experience in Yosemite. I mean, how do you go to Yosemite or a big national park and not feel like there's a bigger purpose in life, right? And so I had this wonderful experience. I had this grace and this peace of now is the time to write this book. So the reason that I wrote this book really comes down to I wanted to do a couple of things. I wanted to elevate and celebrate rural education. I wanted the people who are a part of my district and the people who are part of the districts around us and the people who are part of the conversation nationally that maybe we would never hear about them. The Susan, who's my bookkeeper, Courtney, who's my front office lady, Stephen, who's my head custodian, Cheryl, who's my retired math teacher who came back after teaching here for 30 years. I mean, you want to talk about dedication, faithfulness to education, right? All of these people that are not just doing great work at my school, but they're doing great work around the country. And that work needs to be celebrated. And then the last reason I wrote this book, Jen, I wanted to inspire leaders. I want to inspire young leaders, young at heart leaders who say, man, I feel this call to education. And I wanted them to see rural education not as a fallback plan, right? Or not as a retirement option, but I wanted them to see rural education as a place where they could make their mark, but they could make their mark not just for a career, but they could change communities and change lives and change students. And so the book is a call to let, as I say in the book, let the call of rural education burn brighter and let it burn hotter than it's ever burned before. Because the belief is we're in the business of changing lives. We're in the business of inspiring people and our staff, and we're in the business of caring for students and children.
Right. So I want to ask about roots and vision. And I'm going to tell you that a couple Christmases ago, I was talking to my father. He's a farmer. And he's like, they don't need to be replacing that baseball field. It was fine for me at fine, that kind of mindset. Thinking about you coming into a likely tight-knit community with deep roots and deep history, but you need to push for necessary growth. How do you do that? How do you get people to see what children deserve?
It's funny, it's turning kind of into a theme of this episode, but I learned this through failure, right? So I learned a lot of the valuing of tradition. And I did come into a community that had, its traditions, its ways. And so I think one of the big things as a leader is one of the things I've learned when it comes to tradition is we have to honor tradition, and it's always going to have a seat at the table, right? Mm-hmm. Especially in every discussion we have with everybody. There's a way you do things in a rural town as well as a big city, right? There's a way you do things, and you have to find a way that you can connect that, not as a rejection of the past, but as a celebration as we move forward. So great example with your baseball field, right? And one of the things I would do with something like that is I would say, tell me all about what makes this baseball field special, right? And then Jen, what I often do with folks is I say, hey, this is something that we have to do for our kids, right? And this is the importance of it. And then the power of being patient and letting it percolate, right? And change what you can when you can. I think people believe what they see. So one of the things we did immediately when we got to my district, we had walls that hadn't been painted, Jen, for about 30 years. And they were pretty rough, to say the least, right? And so what we did was we kind of treated it like a barn warming. And I just said, everybody meet me up at the school on Saturday. Whoever wants to be there, I'll put you to work. Jen, we had over 85 of our students show up. We had 35 of our teachers, Jen. We have a staff of 38 people. We had 35 of our teachers show up, and we had our churches, we had our civic groups, we had our community show up, and Jen, we painted the school in a weekend. It took 30 years, right? And we were able to empower a community to do the work for children, right? And so then people could see it. It was our hallways we focused on, because my belief was if I can make them see the change that we want, then we can start impacting the classroom. Then we can start improving technology in the classroom. Then we can start improving instruction in the classroom. And over the past couple of years, the walls that they saw and the facilities that they saw and the changes that they started seeing on the outside, where we were putting beautiful flowers in front of our building, right? And we don't need those beautiful flowers. No, we don't. But isn't this nice for the students? And they could take photos at it for graduation, right? And then they begin to see it. And now we're starting to see the change in the hearts, not just the change in the facility or the change that you see with your eyes. Now we're starting to see the change of the hearts, where our instruction is going deeper and our opportunities are growing for our students here.
My favorite metaphor in what you just said is, we don't need these flowers. As a child, to think somebody cared enough to put a daffodil here, I mean, it's such a testament about our belief in the next generation. And it really is about giving to them so that they can feel that sense of value and feel that somebody cares about their future. And to that point, I see so many times that rural educators focus on what they don't have. Well, must be nice, to have turf fields, must be nice to have walkie-talkies at worst, must be nice, how does your framework shift that mindset from scarcity to stewarding resources? I mean, 85 kids came to paint the walls. Or 85 people came to paint the walls. Tell me about shifting from scarcity to the resources we have for maximum impact.
Well, you definitely understand rural districts about your comment with the walkie-talkies, because I think I just walked in here and had to get my walkie-talkie to work. So I understand that completely. Two things on this, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about with leaders. Number one, we cannot compare ourselves to somebody else, especially in rural districts, because we can't afford comparison, right? We've all heard the phrase "keeping up with the Joneses," and in our practical life, in our personal life, when we keep up with the Joneses, Jen, the data, what happens? People go broke, right? And as Dave Ramsey says, we buy things to impress people that we didn't even like in the first place, right? I don't think that's any different in schools. There's a beautiful turf field down the way from us. It's stunning and it is gorgeous. That's on our 20-year plan, If our enrollment goes the right direction and we get the resources and we get the partnerships that we need, it's on a plan somewhere in our facility plan. But we're not in a race to get there. It's there, and they're running their race, and they're doing amazing. And those leaders, we're excited to partner with them when we can. But for us, we're running our race. We had to start with walls. Then we had to move into classrooms. Now we're moving, and I'm excited to share these things, but we're moving into programs, and we're moving into opportunities to equip and empower students, right? And so we're running our race at our time. And the best way I would say for leaders to do this, especially in rural districts, and it's hard, but write it down. Write down your plan. And when you write down your plan, you know what you're trying to accomplish. And also you're going to get your plan done faster. We did a facility plan. It was a 5-year facility plan here in our district. We wrote it down. We got the right people around it. And we got it done in 2.5 years because it was a plan on paper, right? So practical nugget right there is write it down. The other part that's so important, Jen, for rural leaders is partnership and the ability to not have to do it by yourself, but there's somebody in your community right now that wants to help with that baseball field. There's somebody in the community that wants to paint the hallways of your school. There's somebody that wants to come up here the week before school starts and power wash the entrance just so it looks great for students, right? And if we as leaders can build partnerships and then appreciate those partnerships and say, this wasn't done by me, this was done by us, and not just our staff. This was done by our community. And look at how powerful our community is. A quick story, Jen. Our district was landlocked for over 40 years. In the past year, we had a land that we were never going to get change hands to a brand new owner. And he said, I want to bless the school and I want this land to be used for a school farm and real world learning opportunities for the district. Jen, 40 years, it was never going to get it land. And we got 8 acres right off to our west that we are starting a school farm. We actually just started our elementary farm this last week with our students. The vision is real when we believe in partnership and what we can do together, not just what we can do alone with just the money. I think if we count just on our budgets, we're limiting our resources instead of seeing the amazing things and people around us who can help.
Right, right. So let's tie that to community and opinions and expectations. In a town where everybody knows everybody, how do you maintain those, the professional vision, the energy, the steadfast commitment to projects and visions and what you've written down in farms when politics can get really loud and you do have the people saying, I don't need a school farm. How do you? Yes.
So real. It's so real. I actually had a conversation with a parent the other day. It was a pretty tense conversation. This is just the reality of being in the field. Went to a basketball game. I had my family in the front row. My son spilled his nachos, right? My boy spilled his nachos, and that parent went and got nachos, right, for my son. Like, it is real, right? And there is this level of, hey, there's this tension that we feel, right? And this disagreement sometimes that we feel. But I think it's our job. I think it's our job to show kindness, to build the bridge, to be the first to forgive, right? And here's the thing. We can have our empire, Jen, right? We can have it our way as leaders, and we can have the offense and we can have the hurt, right? But that's all we get. That's all that we get. And if I were to turn around to that parent and say, don't give my kid nachos, you know what I mean? I was right, that's all we would get. But in that moment, there was a moment where we could have some reconciliation. Remember, hey, we're here for children. We're here for each other. And in a rural area, I may disagree with you, but I'll give you the shirt off of my back if it's going to help you, and we'll do what we can for each other. And so I think the ability to be honest, I think the ability to be kind, I think the ability to be fair. One of the things I always share with people when I give them a hard decision, hey, is that fair to you? I want to be super fair to you. And is that fair to you? And usually the answer is yes. And if the answer is no, then I'm like, let's have another conversation.
Right.
It sounds like we need to talk some more stuff out, So just the ability to be kind. And like I said earlier, being a good friend is the most important thing you can do as a leader to those around you when you're trying to build a community that is equipping and empowering students.
I'm thinking about, if I remember, I will title this episode "Forgiveness Looking Like Nachos." That's a great. I also am thinking about my friend Greg. He's been on the podcast before after a horrific experience with a school shooter of someone in his community. And he texted me a couple of weeks ago and he said, rural principal, some kids as a prank had put a bunch meaning like 4 small bait fish in his mailbox. He's like, and he said, I don't even know who I made mad, but here it is. And I think the next day at school, it became clear who did it. And it was kind of a joke and, small town stuff, the fish baking in his mailbox. He's like, wow, this is rural leadership right here.
It truly is.
I think it helps. My friend Greg is very involved in a professional organization to help him not feel like he's on an island. It's very easy for rural educators, teachers too, principals, superintendents to feel like they're alone. Nobody gets it. So what are the specific things that you advocate for that help leaders reduce that burnout and gain clarity in what they're supposed to be doing every day?
So good. I think number one is keeping the main thing the main thing. I love what Jimmy Casas always says, but he says, do you remember what you were like in the interview chair? You remember what you said? Remember the promises you made? Remember the passion that you had? And I just love that, going back to that, they call it remember your why now, right? But
Right.
remembering who you are and remembering who you serve. The other thing I always share with leaders is actually like the people that you serve. Like after our interview, I get to go out and I get to go have an awesome conversation with Courtney about the amazing work she did in our greenhouse for our elementary farm. Jen, I am excited about that conversation. You know what I mean? And so we have to love the people that we serve. And when we love somebody, it's never because of what we're going to get back. It's because I get to be the one that gets to give it to somebody else. And Jen, let's face it, in isolation, that's hard. That's really hard to do. And so the thing I always encourage, especially rural leaders, is connection beats burnout. Connection beats burnout. And so a couple of strategies that I use, there's 3 guys in my life. 2 of them are my mentors and 1 person I'm mentoring. So you need to be able to receive, and you also need to be able to give with creativity, right? And we meet every single week. I have on my calendar, that time does not move. Every single week, I meet with these 3 guys and we talk. And sometimes it's just by phone, but most of the time it's like this through Zoom. And so every single week, that's the connection. Those are my 3. Those are the inner circle. That's the core of who I'm around. Our values, our faith, the things we're shooting for in life, right? The impact we want to have in our school, they align, right? So number 1, having a close circle, having an inner circle. Number 2, connection. Show up to places. Jen, another thing I learned this year, there was a friend of mine, a superintendent, who had been inviting me to a meeting, and I would not. I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I feel weird. And let's face it, working in education school, right? And so you feel like there's weirdness or things. Jen, I went to the meeting last week. It was amazing because I said to myself, I was willing to show up. You know what I mean? And so sometimes I think that isolation, we do it to ourselves as rural leaders.
Right.
Have the inner circle, but be willing to show up, try new things, try to build a new relationship. And at the end of the day, if you're still feeling isolated, you can always call me and I'll always have your back and we can talk through it.
I think that connection is, I don't like to overuse the word critical, but it's so true. And sometimes I think about, maybe I need to move on to a different job, but then I think I love these people. I love these people I work with. They're so hardworking and so incredible and so dedicated. So to have, what a gift, right? To feel that connection to the human beings that you get to see every day.
Jen, that's a powerful point. I go ahead and finish. That's beautiful.
No, I was going to tie it to kids too. You and the second grader that you talked about that you walk out and see, you emphasize every child counts. How do you in that small school setting allow for a type of student success that maybe isn't as visible or easy to replicate in larger districts?
Jen, what a great question. Here's the small and simple truth about what makes small schools different. I know every student. I know every parent. I know every community member. When it comes to my kids, I know their hopes. I know their dreams. I know their fears. I know what they're struggling in class right now. I could walk into that second grader's room, and if it's reading, math, social studies, science, whatever it is, I know what they're going to be, how they're going to approach that, right? And this is what we talked about a little bit earlier. It's shifting from status to significance in leadership. Jen, anybody can have success. You're successful, right? Look at your amazing career. Look at this podcast that you have, the reach that you're successful, right? You're doing amazing. And Jen, you have status. You are incredibly accomplished. You do amazing things. I love your writing. I love your work.
What happened? What happened? Get back to the, I'm blushing. What's happening?
But more than that, Jen, you're focused on significance. And you're focused on leaders, and you're focused on making an impact. And in the same way, that's what we do in rural education. We're focused on, to use a name, Jerry. We're focused on Rory. We're focused on, Anna. We're focused on what their needs are. And that connection goes so much further than just, they're in part of our district. Oh, I've been a part of a big district where you go and they're like, oh, I'm the principal at so-and-so. Oh, my son goes there. And you're like, oh, cool. You know what I mean? And and there's room for everybody at the table. We need all of those experiences at the table. But one of the things that makes rural districts so special is I know every student, and it means something to me. Their
Right.
success means something to me.
And when a kid messes up and maybe, shoves some kid in the hallway and they end up in your office, you can immediately say, Chase, what were you thinking? As opposed to, hold on, let me look up your name. Oh, okay, you're a sophomore who, you know it. You know them already.
No, but I think that's just the power of knowing kids.
That's right. Knowing who they are and knowing their parents too. So let's talk about an elephant in the room. We're almost done with questions, but I hear people say a lot, I would love to work rural, but I can't afford it because small schools can't always compete on salary schedules with the suburban giants or the urban giants. So why do you stay knowing you probably will never own a house on Maui and knowing that you need teachers to come and stay in rural communities?
Well, number one, I think we need to do a better job as leaders attracting great talent to rural areas. And I think we need to improve our offerings that we have to life-changing people that are our teachers.
Right.
Because without our teachers, what do we have? And so as a whole, in national conversation, state level conversation, we need to do a better job of recruiting, of retaining high quality teachers that can impact students' lives. So that's on us as leaders. We got to do better, and we got to get more creative. Missouri, we do the 4-day work. We do the 4-day school week thing for rural areas. We have, improvements on the salary schedule. One of the things that we try to do is we do free food. So we're in a very rural area where there's no restaurants. And so if you work with us, we'll feed you, things of that nature where we just want to be creative. We have a workout facility. There was not a gym in our town. We made a gym happen. So that was for our students, number one, but also our staff, right? We want our staff to be able to be fit and healthy as well and achieve the goals that they have with their personal life as well. So our staff comes up all the time and they're working out in our weight room, things of that nature. And so I think we got to be creative, number one. But Jen, I think it goes back to something more important. It goes back. So, and I think I'm going to say this without giving advice, but saying something that's special. When I got here, there was a teacher who had taught here longer than I was alive. She taught over 40 years in this district. When I was around her, I didn't tell her anything. I listened. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? She was the expert and I was the one that needed to learn. There was another teacher here, 36 years, retired. We couldn't fill his position, came back the next year and taught for us. Cheryl, who I talked about earlier, same thing, taught over 2 decades. Right now, my AD, who is here for over 3 decades, is substituting in one of our classes because she knows we need the help for our kids. Mm-hmm. People are here not because of the paycheck or because of the money, and I hate to say it that way because it's a platitude, but they're here because they believe in this community, they believe in this school, and they believe in this town. And as leaders, we have to steward that. And so my practice is, what do you need from me? Mm-hmm. It goes back to the beginning of this interview, the things I learned from my dad and service to others and saying, what can I do to make your job easier? Can I get you something? Do you need tools to do this job better? I don't know how I'm going to buy that, but I'm going to find a way to make it happen. Right. And I am going to be your champion. And I will make sure that you have what you need to do the life-changing work that you're doing for students. And that's what makes rural schools special as well, is we as leaders have to be committed to the success, not of our success, but the success of our students and the success of our teachers in our community.
I wish our dads could meet. My dad, again, farmer, not a wealthy man by any stretch. He always says, well, honey, money ruins you and helping people heals you. And I think that right, that's true. Money ruins people. Look at what's happening nationally. It's this chase for wealth. And at the end of the day, if the AD is subbing in a classroom, knowing she ain't gonna get compensated for that, right? But she's still gonna do it because the kids need it. And then probably the appreciation comes from you. You say thanks so much, and that's her pay, and that's got to be have some value. Do you still have your dad? Is he still with us?
He is. I'm so blessed. He actually moved down this way last year, so I get to see him, and it's fun to walk now. It's fun to walk around with him here on campus, and he's like, "Well, I would do this and this and this," and again, it's fun to be around subject matter experts about things you don't know everything about, right?
I bet he's so proud of you. I bet he remembers you pushing a broom. He probably gave you the broom busy all those years ago, and here you are. You're doing the work. What is a
Well,
piece of advice you would give to our listeners? What would you leave them with?
hey, if you're a real leader, you're where you're supposed to be and you're doing the work you're supposed to be doing. And it's
Mhm.
never about what's in the future. It's about what's under your feet right now. And there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of things that are going on. Tune it out. Serve with your whole heart. Love your neighbor the best you possibly can, and fight that you can, even through the rejection, the betrayal, the hurt, and the pain. Fight to stay connected, because in connection we can make a difference.
That's what makes us human. Well, thank you so much for being here. Your journey from the coast, from shadowing your dad as a custodian to the heartland of Missouri, really does show us. It's not about the size of the zip code or the how often the walls get painted, even, but the depth of the commitment. So thank you so much for being here.
That's so well said, Jen. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yes. And for those listening, if you're leading in a small school and you kind of feeling the weight of an entire community on your shoulders, just remember Will saying, it's about the connections, and it's not about the scarcity. It's about what we're doing for kids. So pick up a copy of the Empowered Rural Education Leader. You can find that on Amazon. And thank you so much for tuning in to Principal Matters. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.